Okay, I do apologize. Can you hear me okay now, everyone? Does that mean no, you can't hear me, or you're also on mute?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, I do apologize. I did have my headset on mute, so please forgive me. I will start again um, from the top, as they say, and I'll edit this piece out when I make the webcast recording. Okay, so this is SAS SPE 3B, where we're going to be covering remote sites, self-service, self-enrollment, monitoring, tokens, and I've also added some general support examples in this module as well. So the first thing I want to cover is the system configuration details. I find that when you're dealing with customers that have SAS on-prem, whether it's PCE or SPE, the system configuration details holds a lot of valuable information, especially from a support perspective. So I've pulled out an example from one of the customers that I've dealt with in the past, and I just want to review some of the details of the system configuration. So to find the system configuration, the customers can log in as a local or domain administrator to one of the primary or secondary SAS boxes. Under System, under Setup, you'll find a link to the system configuration details. Now I've pulled out an example. So in this example, we can see right away, which is very important, we can see what version of the platform the customer is using. And this is important when you're troubleshooting, specifically if there's older versions of the platform, they may be experiencing issues where we've actually released a product release notice to provide a fix to a certain problem. But it's always important with on-prem customers that you get a copy of the system configuration details so you know how the system is set up, for example, the versions. We can see here on the second block, this particular customer was using a Microsoft SQL as the data source, and we can see they have a primary host and a failover host. So we understand that this customer has two separate databases on two separate hosts. The next section I want to cover in the system configuration example is information about the license. Okay, so this is important. For example, if a customer is looking to increase anything on the license, so whether it be sites or whether it be capacity or whether it be tokens, or maybe the date in which the product will stop working, again, providing the correct license number as an example to customer service so they can create yet a new license for this client. Now, I just want to point out a couple of things that I always look for in my SAS license for on-prem. Number one, as I mentioned, is the license number. Excuse me. Like I mentioned, if you want to increase anything on a license, making sure you provide the license number to customer service. You'll notice that each time a license has been created, you will see that this value here will be incremented. So we can see that this is the third edition of this license that is being provided to this customer in this example. The next thing I look at is the end date, just so that I know and I inform the customer so they know when the service will stop working based on an end date. The licenses are no longer perpetual. They're based on a subscription, just like SaaS Cloud. I always look at the capacity just to make sure that the capacity that the license has is similar or the same as what the customer has purchased. So in this case, 20. In the SAS Service Provider Edition, where we have the multi-tier, multi-tenant, the number of multi-tier and multi-tenants you can have is governed by the license. And we can see here that the number of allowed accounts is 10. That means that I can create my root service provider, which would effectively be one account, and I can create 9 other subscribers or service providers as child or parent accounts in the hierarchy. Again, this is important specifically if you're dealing with service providers. Again, to the best of my knowledge, we don't charge for additional number of allowed accounts, but in some of our larger service providers, this number may not be 10, it may be 100, it may be 1,000. Again, we don't want to limit our service provider customers with the number of tiers that they create. So this is a value that I always look out for. The last value is the site's capacity, so the number of SAS sites. And myself in professional services, when I'm helping service providers to build their own version of our SAS cloud, but in their data center, when we're creating network diagrams and we're determining, how many of each they're having, I want to make sure that this site capacity is the correct number. Okay, so in this case, it's allowing me to have 10 sites. Effectively, I would say that would be 5 sites at data center 1 and 5 sites at data center 2, just as an example. So these are key values that I always look for myself. We can see how the mail is configured. We can see whether or not they're using SMS plugin. We can see the log level and where the log is being delivered. In this case, we're using default logging, and it's being sent to an event viewer. We can see archiving. We can see whether or not they're permitting LDAP. We can see the free radius synchronization. In this case, free radius synchronization is set to enabled. So this would tell me that this customer is not using NPS and they're using free radius as the radius server. And the last item we see here is whether or not we have any HSM configured within the system. So again, please do your best to try and get the system configuration details as early as you can on a support call, because again, it does provide some really valuable information. Now, I know we covered sites in PCE, but I wanted to give you an example of sites for a service provider edition. Okay. So this is an example of a Visio that we have that we build for customers or service providers. And this is basically showing me 2 data centers, a primary on the left and a secondary on the right. And when we talk about sites, okay, we can see here would be my SAS Site 1. Okay, I would then build a secondary box for my failover core server, which would take my SAS Site 2. And this particular example, the customer or the service provider wanted to do certain functionalities in the DMZ, which are available, to their customers and their customers' users. And we can see that I have 4 sites in my DMZ. I have 2 of the self-service, self-enrollment, provisioning, and BSIDCA, which is our management API. I have an optional LDAP sync agent server, so the sync agent server is being stripped down to only provide that in the primary, and I have the same in the secondary. So in this environment, when I was requesting the license, I would be asking the licensing at customer service to provide me a license with 6 sites. And we can see we would have our core, and then we would have our 5 other sites. So depending on the environment, it is important to understand how many sites would be available. Now, the SAS core, so if I take a look at the left-hand side of this diagram, this is my SAS core server. So this server does all the functionality that this server and that this server would do. Effectively, what we're doing is we're turning off certain components or certain web application pools or websites here, for example, for self-service and self-enrollment, to provide that in the DMZ. So I know we covered the sites. I'm just going to quickly just review, because it's a short video, sites information or site importing, again, just so that you can see this process. So again, in the DMZ, I would install SAS, right-click it, run as the administrator, like I would do normally. I would then log in as my local or domain administrator, and I would export my site information. So I click on sites. We can see here, this is where I would do my exporting of my site record. So I would save my file key and save my site file. I would then move that site information over to my servers, my secondary sites, or my servers in the DMZ, and I would begin the site import. Again, pointing it to my file key. So I'm going to open my file key. There's my site import key. I would then point to the actual file itself, the site record. So this is my Black Shield site, ESC file. I paste in my key file, click on import, and I would, again, like I mentioned before, I would see this message that tells me that I have successfully imported a site. So if you don't see this message and it simply returns you back to that same screen, chances are that the site has not been imported properly. I would check to make sure that there's any ports, specifically between two data centers or the DMZ, that the ports are open to the database. And also, like we mentioned on the private cloud edition, which caught one of the guys in support recently, is the use of the word localhost when you're connecting to the database. So like it says, I need to log in again. So again, I'm going to come back. I'm going to log into this server again. We'll see now that it looks like a full-blown SAS that's being configured. I've got all my proper tabs. We can see here now under the sites, we can see that we have our two sites. And as I would continue to do this for the network diagram that I had shown you, effectively, I would then see sites being total to 6. Now, when we talk about the servers in the DMZ, there are different methods that you can use to turn off certain components. Previously with Black Shield, we actually had independent self-service and self-enrollment packages that you could install in the DMZ. These are no longer available with SAS version 3. They were available with Black Shield version 2. So we can turn off the websites, or what I've found that most customers are doing is they're actually blocking the URLs inside a web config file. So we can see in this example, what I'm doing is I'm actually turning off the access to the BSID-CA and also the self-enrollment. I just seen a message from Holger. Hey Holger, feel free to inform the colleagues. I know that you're a very senior support guy, so there may be information that you know that I may not know. So feel free to come off mute and comment on some of the things that I've said, if you don't mind. Are you there, Holger? Okay. Holger mentioned that, like I mentioned before, oh, sorry, he's got no mic, no worries. Holger mentioned in the chat window that the remote self-service and self-enrollment packages, like I mentioned, we had in Black Shield, they are coming back into SAS version 3. So in certain environments, you may not need to block these particular URLs, because we will be bringing that feature back. And effectively, you install that package on a DMZ, and effectively it will communicate back to your SAS core server. Until then, we do have a workaround, which is using the blocking of the URLs. I've provided this just as some very basic information. If you do have a customer that is looking for support to help them to do this, feel free to reach out to myself or Paul Pravat or Henry Lamb or Stephen Allen. We're all very familiar with this process, and I'm sure Holger is as well. So I also wanted to touch base again, because it relates to support on the self-service pages and modules. Now, we all know, if you've taken the previous classes from Leslie or Henry, you all know that SAS offers the ability to have, whether it's cloud or on-prem, to have its own customizable self-service page. Now, I found that some customers will allow their end users to access this page. I also found that some customers will have the help desk use this page on behalf of the customer. Now, when a end user customer is using it, basically any of these items would be available. I found if a customer's help desk is doing tasks on behalf of the user, the only thing that I wouldn't advise them doing would be resetting of pins, simply because it means that somebody at the help desk may break policy by knowing what the user's pin is. So I don't want to dwell on all of these items. What I want to do is just quickly touch base on a few of these. Actually, I'll go through all of them and give you some details. So the first thing we have that we can turn on is the My Profile module. So behind each module, we have a number of pages that can be customized, turned on, turned off, etc. So behind the My Profile module, we have the ability for a user to see their login statistics, to update their questions and answers for security questions, and to look at any outstanding token activations. These are the items that are available to a user that is being synced by LDAP or is being directly connected to LDAP. Okay, there's another item that we have that's called Update My Details if you are a non-LDAP user, and I'll show you that in a few moments. So when we look at View My Login Statistics, again, an example here of viewing my login statistics. I can see when I last logged in, how many today, how many this week, how many this month, how many logins this year. I can see these details as an end user. Again, it doesn't really give you much from a technical support perspective, but it does give the user the ability to see, how many times he or she has logged in. When we take a look at the update the security questions and answers, again, the administration team would have defined the question sets. And of course, in order for the user to utilize these question sets, they will need to provide the appropriate answers. So we can see here I've created a couple of question sets. Again, a customer would have these defined based on their policy. What is my pet name, or what is a mother's maiden name? Just basic information that can be used, again, for a user that wants to log in to the self-service portal using the question and answers. When we take a look at my outstanding token activations, the system will tell me whether or not I have any outstanding enrollments that are associated with my account. Like I mentioned, if you're a non-LDAP sync user or a non-Direct Connect LDAP user, you do have the ability to view and update your profile. So you can see first name, last name, username, and email. Now the self-service page also allows the end user to create their own user record. So like I mentioned before, we can create users manually in the UI. We can import users from a CSV. If it's on-prem, we can have a direct connect to LDAP. We can synchronize to LDAP. We can use the management API or the WSDL to create users. You can also have users create their own accounts through self-service. Again, and this is only when it's non-AD or LDAP accounts. So effectively, I could give a URL to all of my users and have them go create their own accounts, and through self-service also request their own tokens if that's the solution I'm looking to provide. We talk about requesting of a token. There is a complete workflow in the self-service manual. I advise that you take a look at this workflow. It's probably just a little small for me to go through it and find details, but please take a look on the SAS microsite. You will see that there is a self-service PDF which goes through all of the items on self-service, and I would take a look at this workflow so you can understand kind of how it works. Now, we talk about requesting of a token. In order to turn on or to have the ability to request a token, we need to have self-service authorities. So we need to have at least one level of approval and one level of issuing. Okay. So kind of the basic workflow would be the user would log in with a secret question and answer perhaps to the self-service page. He or she would click on requesting of a token. That user would then receive an email that asks, hey, did you request this token? And once they clicked on that link in the email, that would then begin the approval process. So an email would go to my approval operator and my issuing operator in order for me to complete, getting that token to me. Now, in the requesting of a token in the pages, I have the ability to define which type of token I want my users to request. So we can see here's an example of some of the options that we can provide of the requesting of a token. Resetting of your PIN is available through self-service. Again, we have two types of pins. We have what's known as server-side pins, and we have client-side pins. In the top example, we can see here, this is me changing my server-side pin. Server-side pins are predominantly used with hardware tokens, where the formula is the one-time password is equal to the PIN plus the passcode, and the PIN would be server-side. If I need to change that PIN because I feel it's being compromised or my policy states that I must change my PIN at a given frequency, again, without contacting the help desk, I can go to the self-service page and I can create my new PIN. Now, client-side pins, the formula for a client-side PIN would be the OTP is equal to the passcode as an example, because the PIN is actually changeable within the app. So whether it's on your smartphone or on your PC, you'll have a menu option to go in and change your PIN, and providing your current PIN and your new PIN will allow you to perform that task. One of the tokens that we have is a grid-based token based on the GridSure technology. So again, we have the ability through self-service for a user with a grid token assigned for he or she to access self-service and change their PIP, which is the personal identification pattern, at any time. So again, without contacting the help desk to provide this task or this ability to do so, I can access the self-service page, click on reset my PIP, and again, I can recreate a new pattern on the grid, and again, that would be my one-time password based on what characters I see within the grid. We have the ability to resynchronize tokens. So we have a resynchronize token policy from the very first module that I provided you in this series. We talked about resync. So we have event synchronous tokens. We have time synchronous tokens. Each of these tokens have the ability to go out of sync. So we do give you the ability through self-service to resynchronize those tokens. So this example at the top is for an event-based token, which is based on challenge and response. So effectively, the server is issuing the user a challenge. They would need to enter that challenge into their token to receive the appropriate response to synchronize that token back to the server. With a time-based token, we're simply asking the user for 2 consecutive OTPs. So during self-service, they would be asked, please provide OTP, and then they'd be asked, please provide another OTP, and during that process, the time-based token would be synchronized back to the server. The last module on the self-service page is the resending of an SMS. So if a user has a SMS mobile phone number registered with SAS and they have a SMS token assigned to them, and the service provider or the customer has either SMS credits or a SMS gateway or modem configured, we will allow the user to request a new SMS. Now, if you remember from earlier sessions, we can deliver SMS on demand with one code. We can have SMS with up to 5 codes, and we can also support SMS in challenge response. In challenge response, again, resending of the SMS would not be applicable. It's only for cases when you're delivering 1 OTP or 5 OTPs that you would use the self-service module for requesting a new SMS OTP. So I wanted to just quickly show you, I did reach out to some of my colleagues on the service provider team, Gary Marsden and Stephen Allen, and asked them about some of the modules, some of the information that they think that may be useful in this last series. One of them was about branding. So I just wanted to show you just a quick little video on branding. In this video, you're going to see branding of both the console and also of the self-service and self-enrollment page. So under comms, under your virtual server, under customized branding, you're going to see you have a number of items here. On the right-hand side, as I mentioned before, every module in SAS has this eye that provides you information about that particular module. So under branding, we can customize fonts, colors, buttons, logos, titles, labels, and product name. So I'm just going to show you quickly just a quick branding session so you can see a quick example of branding. So we can see I've changed my background color. I'm now going to go change my buttons color just as a quick example. I'm now going to change the logo on the top left-hand corner from the default SafeNet logo to this customer's logo, so we can add this logo. I'm going to change my enrollment background. So I've built some examples of each of these. So we can see there's the logo with matching the background. I have the ability also to change my enrollment background as per my customer's color scheme. I have the ability to change the titles, so when we log on to the console, rather than it being branded SafeNet, I can white label it to customize it to my customer name, also for the self-service page. So I'm going to add the customer name here and click Apply. I also have the ability to customize the product name. So this will change all of the mention of the word SafeNet in all of the SMS and email messages that are configured within the system. So that's basic branding of the console. I now move over to our self-service page. So we can see here, this is my unique URL for self-service, and this is basically what the default self-service page looks like without any branding. So with a couple of clicks, a couple of JPEGs, and the right color scheme, I can effectively change the look and feel of this page. So I'm going to change the SafeNet logo over to my customer's logo. I'm going to change the background colors. I'm going to add a banner image. So I've created a small banner. Just to match the color scheme, I'm going to change the homepage color and the banner color as well, and also the logo background color, just to match up the color scheme. Once I've performed this task, I click Apply, and if I go back to my self-service page and I click Refresh, you can see that within a few moments, I've now branded the self-service page from the default to something that my customer would fancy. And there we go. We've got our logo, we've got our banner color, so we've got our banner, and we've got our background color that matches. So it is very simple to do branding. I just wanted to show you that quickly so that you get an understanding on how that is performed. Now, I did reach out for this next section. I did reach out to some of our colleagues in SAS operations about monitoring. This is probably not specific to support, but I just wanted to give you all an idea of some of the things that we monitor or that can be monitored both with SAS Cloud and the SAS Service Provider Edition. So if you remember the video that we had at the beginning of this slide deck, we had SAS Core Server, we had SAML Server in the DMZ, we had Self-Service Self-Enrollment Server in the DMZ, we had a Free Radius Server in the DMZ, and we also had a Remote LDAP Server in the DMZ. So taking a look at some of the things in this example that you may want to monitor. On the Free Radius Server, again, monitoring ping sessions, monitoring drive space on different directories within Linux, monitoring the bond, monitoring the CPU, monitoring an authentication test with Radius, monitoring the disk arrays, monitoring the memory, monitoring SNMP. These are things that, as this example is kind of a best practice for our service provider customers, that we kind of recommend that they monitor. When we take a look at our SAS Core Server, again, monitoring the bonds, monitoring drive space, any application, we've got some backup utilities, monitoring, these functionalities, the physical memory, the CPU, our disk array, SNMP. We can even get down to monitoring the temperature of the system board is kind of a best practice. We take a look at the database server, again, monitoring bond, monitoring the drives, the backup, the memory, the ping, CPU, the disk arrays, SNMP, and then we have the ability to monitor specific services regarding SQL and temperature board. We talk about the self-service, self-enrollment server in the DMZ, again, monitoring bonds, monitoring drives, monitoring memory, ping, CPU, disk array, SNMP, and SNMP services. It's just a quick example of some of the things that we recommend specifically to our service provider customers on what should be monitored. The next section we're going to talk about is about tokens. So we have many different types of tokens. We probably have more tokens than some of our competitors. So I broke them down as follows. We have Radius tokens. This is used for customers that are migrating from one vendor to another using Radius. We have third-party oath tokens. We have our SMS-based tokens. We have our grid-based tokens, we have hardware tokens, we have software tokens. So I just wanted to touch base on each of these so that you could get an understanding of how they work. We talk about Radius tokens. Again, these are used for migration. So when you migrate, for example, an RSA-based token that has an ACE server that's being used in Radius mode, rather than setting up like an NPS proxy and proxying between SAS and RSA, we could implement a Radius token capability. And to do so, we have 8 steps that are used in enabling the Radius token. So we do have a guide. I know Holger had been working on updating this guide. Thank you, Holger, for helping with that. Step one, we're going to be adding the users and user source to SAS. Step two, we're going to be configuring the radius communication between the authentication servers. Step three, we're going to configure the SafeNet authentication service radius tokens. Step four, we're going to configure the token template for radius. Step five, we're going to export the token serial numbers from the existing authentication service. Step six, we're going to import those third-party tokens into SAS. Step seven, we have the ability to bulk assign, so we can bulk assign a user ID to a serial number based on a CSV file that would be exported out of the existing system. And step seven, we're going to reconfigure the radius devices and agents to point to SAS, and of course perform testing afterwards. We talk about oath-based tokens, so some of the SafeNet tokens that we have are oath-based, and we also have tokens from other vendors that are oath, and we give the ability to use those oath-based tokens inside SAS. Now, oath is an open standard. We have oath records for oath-based tokens, and effectively, if your customer has an oath-based token and they've been provided with the oath record, again with some minor configuration, usually done by licensing or customer services, we can take that oath record and convert it into a BTK file, which is a Black Shield token file, or a DAT file, and we can import that token into SAS. Okay. I have noticed in the past with some of the oath-based tokens that there is some editing of the oath record that needs to be done in order for it to be imported into SAS. Again, if you're using this with SAS Cloud, I would check with licensing or SAS operations on the correct format. Now, I've created a couple of I've created a video with some examples of importing a radius token and importing a oath token. So I'm going to show you that process now. So the first thing I'm going to do, just for housekeeping, is I'm going to create a container specifically for my oath token and also for my radius-based token. So under container maintenance, I click on add, I give the container name. I now have a new container called oath tokens. Under tokens, under importing of tokens, I have the ability to import my oath-based token. So I choose my container. I then have my oath record. So I scroll down to my oath record, and here I'm using the import Alpine. I click on import, and we can see I now have 5 e-tokens that have been added to the system. I'm now going to show you creating a container for my radius tokens. So again, under groups, under container maintenance, I click on new. I click add to add this container. This is for radius tokens. And I'll go back to, first of all, I'm going to define my radius server. So your radius tokens have a radius server home. So under third-party authentication options, you can see here I have the ability to define my radius server for my radius tokens. So in this case, I've got an example IP of where my server is, and I'm going to provide both primary and secondary server for this example, and the shared secret that is used as well for radius. So now that I've defined the radius server for my radius tokens, I can now go back to my tokens tab, and I can import the radius token file. So again, I choose, in my case, my container. I click browse. I pick my radius token. I click on import, and we can see I have now imported this radius token into the system. So it's a very simple process. Again, probably the most common place you're going to find errors is with the actual formatting of the files itself. So just to recap some of the tokens, again, we have an SMS-based token. Like I mentioned, there's 3 methods of delivery for SMS. Actually, we could say there's 4 if you include the SMS to SMTP. So we have 1 code per SMS message, 5 codes per SMS message, SMS in challenge response, and like I mentioned, rather than the SMS being delivered to the SMS gateway, the SMS can be delivered to an SMTP, which is effectively an email-based token. We have our grid-based token, which is great for customers that are doing a lot of stuff in the web. So effectively any web server can support the grid-based token. We do have a small piece of JavaScript to generate the Turing image, which is the actual grid itself. Again, we have some documentation and some examples of those files, specifically for things like Juniper and Cisco. Those are available. We have 2 types of software tokens. From the CryptoCard or ex-CryptoCard side of the business, we have our MP-1, which we can install locally on flash drives, on Java phones, Blackberries, Androids, iPhones, Windows phones, Mac OS. And we also have the Mobile Pass. Both of these tokens can support event-based and time-based. Myself in professional services, when I'm talking to customers, I kind of push them towards the Mobile Pass token for now, as it seems to be the token that's having more and more development. In some cases, there may not be the support for all the platforms that we have on MP-1 that we have on Mobile Pass, but over time, we should have all of the same platforms that are supported on MP-1 as we have on Mobile Pass. So again, I tend to push customers more to Mobile Pass than to the MP-1, unless, of course, there's not a compatibility on the token token device, so the certain type of smartphone. Again, both support event-based and time-based. We have our hardware-based token lines. So the top one on the left-hand side, this is a KT1 token. It has a dot matrix display. There are 8 characters in that display. This particular token has replaceable battery. It is only 1 battery inside that token, so if the battery does need to be replaced, the token will need to be reprogrammed, and there is an initializer that programs this token via infrared. It almost looks like a little micro mouse where you plug it in USB, and it allows you to effectively program that token via infrared. Because it's a dot matrix display with the token template, you can allow decimal as the OTP, hex, base 32, and base 64. The E-token is another hardware token. It does not have the ability for end users to replace the batteries. It is a 7-segment LCD. So again, the complexity is limited compared to the KT4. Again, these tokens in SAS, they're allocated to you. Sorry, in SAS Cloud, they're allocated to the customer. For other customers that are using private cloud, we do give them the ability to import these tokens like you've seen in the video that I showed previously. We have the 34 and the 3410, which is a time and event-based, little credit card-based token. We have our gold tokens, which is our pin pad-based tokens, which are both time and event. We have the RB1 token, which is a credit card-based token. This particular token has 2 batteries in it that are replaceable. Again, rather than having a 7-segment LCD, it has a dot matrix. So again, you can increase the complexity, decimal, hex, base 32, base 64. This token also can be programmed just like the other hardware tokens through an initializer. The RB1 token also has some limited functionality with regarding of transaction signing or digital signing. Again, they're not as per the standard, but we do allow you to do that based on challenge response and the API. And we also support the platinum-based token, which is an OTP token based on challenge and response. So if you have any questions about the Radius token, third-party tokens, software tokens, or hardware tokens, feel free to reach out to me either by phone or by email or communicator. I'd be more than happy to explain some more of these details about the tokens that we have. Now, as I mentioned, I reached out to a couple of our colleagues on the service provider team, and they just wanted me to just review or go over some of the support models so that you guys can understand what the sales and service provider teams are telling about support, just so that you can see some of that information. I do believe this is the latest. If it's not the latest and greatest, I do apologize. It was information that I was provided. Unfortunately, yes, it was last minute. So we have extended support, and we have plus support that is available for our service provider customers. I've provided some details here about the support model. Again, there is a document on the support model and on the support information that's available. If you need a copy of that, let me know. I can provide that to you. The standard support model, when we talk about SAS for service providers, is the users of the service provider would go to their first line support, which would be their subscriber or their administrator. Users usually go to their first line support if the user fails login, user fails on self-service, wants to create a ticket with their own help desk. The subscriber, again, these guys perform token troubleshooting steps, maybe some resyncing, logging RMAs with the service provider if the token is faulty, or they assist in escalating to the actual service provider themselves. So the service provider, their support desk, they issue RMAs. They provide assistance with troubleshooting with node connectivity, firewall, VPN. They provide assistance with the portal management issues. And again, they escalate to SafeNet. The service providers usually contact SafeNet with RMA replacements, assistance with major issues or incidents, and provide trouble ticket and engineering escalation. So from a service provider's perspective, the service provider's customers have users. Their users contact the subscriber, which is the customer of the service provider. Their administrators would contact the service provider, and the service provider would then have the ability to contact SafeNet support. Of course, this is what in a real-world environment we would like, but in some cases we may have users here directly contacting SafeNet. We may have administrators here directly contacting SafeNet. So it's always good to understand the hierarchy from a support perspective. If you're getting a call from a customer, I don't need to remind you, but it's always good to make sure that your customers are following the support procedure by contacting their first level support if it's not directly to SafeNet. Again, I've added some charts here regarding the different levels that we have for audience, responsibility, action, fix rate, response times, escalation for both levels 1, 2, 3, and 4. Again, these are from the standard support documents that was provided by the service provider team. Last but not least, just on the support model, we just talk about some of the types of problems, escalation, hours, support, extended support, plus support business hours, in and out business hours. Again, these are from the standard support document from the service provider team. Now, having worked on support with Black Shield and SAS earlier versions, I did create some examples of workflow and troubleshooting. These are examples from a specific customer. I try to tell customers that I deal with to create their own examples of workflow. So I just thought I would share these with you. It may help in your case when you're trying to troubleshoot some type of token. So I've created one for hardware, one for software, and one for escalation. So we can see here is an example where you get a call from a user, you establish the reason for the call. So on the far left-hand side, the user's forgotten his or her token. Again, we validate this is actually the user I'm speaking to, and we provide some type of policy. In this example, the customer was okay with providing a temporary password. An alternative would be to provide them with another form factor of token. The next one we have is the token is lost or broken. Again, validating the user to make sure we're speaking to the right user. And then based on the policy, we would provide some type of replacement token. The next one we have is, hey, I've got a faulty token. Again, we would log a ticket. In this case, the user would log a ticket with their own help desk. And we would harvest the user ID, the token type, the serial number, maybe their phone number, and fault description. And just looking at a basic workflow, we would look at, is the token working? So, is the token generating a one-time password? Okay. So in this case, is the token generating a code? No. So some of the things that you may see if the token's not working is, does the token display work? Yes or no? Does the token display the word locked? And if you remember from earlier sessions, we have different types of locking. We have locking on the enrollment, locking on the account, and locking on the token. So in this case, maybe the user has a hardware token, in this case, hardware token. Maybe they've tinkered with it. Maybe they've opened it up and take a look and remove the battery, which may lock the token. Also, some of the tokens, specifically that I know of, the KT token, the RB token, that do have replaceable batteries. If the token battery is going low, about 60 days before the battery depletes, it will start displaying the word battery. So when I turn on the token, it will say the word battery. So again, this is something that a user would report that they're seeing rather than seeing the one-time password. So on the decision, is an OTP being generated? Yes, the token is being generated. We want to make sure that inside SAS that the account is not locked. If the account is locked, we can unlock it, ask the user to validate if he or she can log in again. Again, is the account in Black Shield locked? No, it's not locked. Has the user forgotten his or her PIN? Again, we can troubleshoot that. And last but not least, if the token is generating a code and the account is not locked and the user has not forgotten their PIN, try resyncing the token, because it could be that the token has gone out of sync. Traditionally, I see with event-based tokens, users may click on the token without using a code, and there's only so many times they can do that before going out of sync. And I find that a lot of these things are done in the early days. So a user is provided with a token, and without thinking, they start clicking it like a Tamagotchi toy, and next thing you know, when they log in, they're out of sync. So again, this is just an example of a hardware token workflow. We talk about software tokens. This is an example workflow again for software-based tokens. Again, we'd have workflow if they forgot or lost their device, and we've got troubleshooting for the software token. Again, reported that the token's faulty, log a ticket. Is the token generating a code? No, it's not. Is the application running? Some very basic stuff here. Is the PIN correct? Again, is the token in SAS, is the account in SAS locked? Yes or no? If it is, you can unlock it. And again, if the token's generating a code and the account is not locked and the PIN is correct, then you may want to take a look at resynchronizing that user's specific token. The last example I want to show you before I wrap up with this session is a troubleshooting first line. Second line troubleshooting example. So again, we have in this workflow for a specific customer, we had some workflow regarding unable to authenticate any user, operators unable to access the portal. Again, faulty tokens or the LDAP sync agent is not working. So again, unable to authenticate any user. Again, you would log a ticket. Are we seeing any traffic in the snapshots tab? Yes or no? Are we seeing if we're seeing activity in the snapshot tab, yes. Are we seeing a pass or fail? If we're seeing a success, then again, check the ports perhaps, open in both directions. If we're seeing challenge, check that the shared secret is not a mismatch. If we're seeing challenge, check that they're using PAP, CHAP, MS-CHAP v2, and check that the solution supports that. Again, if we're seeing failures with the token, a quick resolution to see that the solution is working, maybe to just test with a static password, just to eliminate any token synchronization or finger trouble on the end user. Again, we have some basic workflow for operators unable to access the portal, faulty tokens, and again, some basic workflow regarding the LDAP sync agent. Again, you have these as examples. I wouldn't say that these are carved in stone for every single customer, but I myself personally, when I deal with customers in professional service, I try to get them to build their own kind of workflow, and I just wanted to share those with you on this session. And what I'm going to do at this time is I'm going to stop the recording